to by name at all. This is the true level of ayin. Why doesn't it can it not be referred by name? Because there is the source of it itself. What do you refer to by name? Something that I can identify individually. That's what a name is. Identify something on its own. Even if it has a source that makes it happen, but it's still identifiable as a presence. Like the ray of the sun outside of the sun. Even though it comes from the sun, and it's completely dependent on the sun, but nevertheless you could see the ray. Here's the sun and here's the ray. It's a presence, but within the sun, it is not a it is not. It doesn't have its own presence because it's completely dedicated, so to speak, to representing the sun, not itself. So it is completely both. Or mikol mokoim. But yet still, Yodua, it's also known, Shaziv Hashemesh, that this ray of the sun, Hu Behashemesh B'toi Kefi Yoiser, within the sun, it is in greater strength. Mikmoi HaYoisoi Zeireach Al HaOretz B'richuk MeHashemesh. Then, as it is found, shining on the earth at a distance from the sun. Inside the sun, it is much more intense than outside of the sun. Again in parentheses, Elo except Shehu bibchinas ayin legabe mekoiroi. This union that is Ziv Hashemesh is not to be referred to by name because it's completely negligible. It doesn't have any presence. This is only in the sense that it's ayin legabe mekoiroi. But because it is totally null to its source. What does that mean? Sheinei toifes mokoim be'atzmoi. It means that it does not, any toifes mokoim, it does not occupy any place be'atzmoi on its own. Lihiyois eize mitzius dover, to be considered as a presence. It does not have any presence of its own. Ukiinyan shrago betiharo. The similar inyan as the Gemara says, shrago betiharo, a candle in midday. If you put up a candle while the sun is shining, the candlelight is totally unobservable. Huh? Shraga betihara, yeah.
Tiara is daylight?
Mm-hmm. Tiara means bright day, like midday. Yeah. Okay, so this is the mashal, so to speak. This is the analogy that we have from the sun. Um, the principle that the ray of the sun is ayin within the sun. It is completely bottled to the sun. We could, this can be should be understood. It could be viewed as, like we say, shlage b'tira, a candle in midday. So a candle in midday, a candle is a separate entity from the sunlight. The candle essentially, from a candle's perspective, the candle wishes that you recognize its presence. But the sunlight overwhelms it. But essentially, the candle gives off light, and it wants to be respected for the light that it gives off. It has its own presence. But the sunshine overwhelms it. The sunlight that comes from the sun has a different perspective. The sunlight from the sun does not have its own interest. Why does the sunlight come? Because of its own presence, like the candlelight, because it has its own presence. The sunlight comes because of the sun doesn't have its own presence at all.
It's the opposite of the candle.
In that respect, it is the opposite of the candle. But on the other hand, so this sunlight, on the one hand, it is totally dedicated, so to speak, to the sun. Now, its inyan is only to represent the sun, the brightness of the sun. On the other hand, it is intensely bright because, in fact, it represents the sun much more than outside of the sun. So that the fact that it is ayin, that it is not an entity unto itself, actually intensifies its brightness. Do you understand the point in this? It intensifies its brightness because it's not an entity unto itself. This is why it represents the sun totally in 100%. The candlelight, by the way, it's an interesting, the candlelight, actually, when you have a sun ray hitting a candlelight, the candlelight will create a shade, a shadow. Because the brightness of the sun is so much greater than the candle. There is a presence there. It will not create light, it will create a shadow. Whereas the sunlight that comes from the sun will not create its shadow. Because its whole presence is to represent the sun. And because it is completely null in its own presence, this is why it brings out the brightness of the sun in full intensity. It does not block it at all, because it's not an entity. It gives it over completely. Okay. So now let's see further what this is, what significance of that.
Before we go further, isn't there a shadow of the sun though?
What?
When sun shines something, isn't there a shadow? I mean,
No. Sure, the sun shines on something, so this object creates a shadow.
Right.
Of course. I thought you misunderstood. When you shine a sunlight on a candle, not on a candle, on the candle light, on fire, that fire will create a shadow. Because the sunlight is so much brighter than this candlelight. But the candlelight, relative to that brightness, is darkness. So, in terms of producing light, it is totally null. On the contrary, it's obstructing the light. Whereas, but this sunlight within the sun does not create a shadow. Why? Because it actually represents the brightness of the sun in full. It's not a standalone entity. It is not a separate entity. And that's why it represents the sunlight, the brightness of the sun in full intensity. It does not obstruct it. You understand that? There's no obstruction to the sunlight. Okay. Kein al derech zeh. Mira to the parentheses. Kein al derech zeh yuval. In like manner, we will understand the union as in the creation. Yuval, we will understand sheho'ayin ha'maha ve'hayesh debiyam, that the ayin that creates the yesh, the creature, the presence of the world, while it is included in this in ani, this in that it's called b'bchinas ani, included in the ani, this is similar to saying that the sunlight is included inside the sun, within the sun itself. Im ki hu botel gamri, although that this ayin is totally bottled, ad she'enoi oile b'shem klal, even so that it does not deserve, it cannot be referred to us by name, because it doesn't have a presence. Gam lehikores b'shem ayin. You cannot even call it, does not even have a presence to be referred to as a separate entity, to be called ayin. I'm going to skip over, this is extremely involved, a little in insert here. But we'll revisit it. And I want to go down, this is going down 6 lines. The line begins ho'ayin. Okay? After the Mokir Yeshu Kulhi.
Oh, if we need the next page, maybe I can make copies.
What?
If we're going to need the next page today.
Okay, we'll see. No, that's not.
Yeah.
I want to get the point, and then we'll go back to this. This is very subtle things in there. Okay. So this ayin that is mokili biyah is completely botel. The term botel is very commonly used in Chassidus. And botel is an extremely important concept. And the principle of botel is, like we even talk in terms of a person, an avoider that one has to have bitul. The principle of bitul means, so bitul means nullification. But there are two, you can nullify, but the minute you say nullification, you would say, okay, eradicate it, make it non-existent. That's the biggest bitul. But then that's not bitul. Eradication, you know what eradicate means? Make it something non-existent. If you make it non-existent, then there is nothing there to be bottled. Bottle applies only to something that is a presence. But this presence is representing not itself, but its source. That's my bottle. Like it says by a shliach shlodem kimoisei. So a shliach is a separate entity, is a human being, and yet what he does is considered like his mishaleyach did it, because he dedicates his actions to the mishaleyach, to the one who sent him. But if he were not a human being at all, then he couldn't be a shliach. So the same meaning is in this oil. We say the oil is bottle. Bottle does not mean that the oil is not there, but it is there, but it does not stand for itself. It stands for whatever the moyer is, the source is, not for itself. Okay, do you understand the concept? Bottle. So that's what we're saying, that even though the oil is bottle completely, but nevertheless, this ayin is, as is included in the source, he is there with greater strength, yoiser harbe, much more then when it becomes later on, b'pchinas ayin lahaves hayesh debiyah, that it becomes a ayin to create the yesh of biyah. In simple terms, okay, what this means, that just as the ray of the sun comes from the sun, and then it extends itself out into the world. And when it extends itself out into the world, it becomes a cognizant, a recognizable entity of light. And it actually has a function, an independent function. It brings light to the world. While the ray of the sun, as it is inside the sun, doesn't do anything of independently on its own. You can't even tell that it's there. And yet, it is much more intense inside the sun than when it becomes an entity to affect the world. The same is true in the Oyer Eliki, in the godly light that creates the world. That the godly light that creates the world extends itself to the point where it can create a yesh, a worldly presence. And this is yesh mei ayin. It creates a novel entity, a novel presence. But when this ayin is contained within its source, which is in the ani, it is a non-presence, and yet it is the greater intensity than when it is involved in creating the yesh. Okay, this is the point that we're making here now.
I understand that part, but how is it in the sun? I mean, like, it's so powerful. And how is it light? How is it, like, I know it's like, so physical, it sort of understand it to some extent, but, like, it's just, how do you, like, it's powerful. It's a core of the sun. How is that light?
No. The core of the sun, that's not what we're referring to. The core of the sun is the source for this. We're talking about the light. We're talking about sunlight as it in its presence within the sun. The light that reaches us originates inside the sun. So it first created inside the sun, and then it emanates further out. So when it emanates, it becomes of less intensity than when it is inside the sun. On the other hand, when it emanates, it becomes of greater presence than when it is within the sun. Okay. Sholochein. Okay, we have 3 lines from the bottom. In Mitzvah Shem, once we get the full exposition here, we'll go back and discuss it and put it in perspective for ourselves. Just want to get the points now. Sholochein, but therefore, Neheiro Tato Koori Todi Linheiro Ilo. This is a quote from the Zohar, where it says, Nehoira Tato. Nehoira Tato means the light below, the lower light. Koori Todir is arousing, is calling forth. Todir constantly. Koori means arousing, Todir constantly. Linehoiro ilo, to the higher light, v'loi shochich, and it does not cease, does not quieten down. It does not, so to speak, ever stop calling forth the higher light. K'misha Kosov, as the Pasuk says, Laman yezamer choved v'lo yidei. Laman is amercha choved, so that it would sing to you, zamercha choved, in glorifying you, v'lo yidoim, and not stop and not become and not go quiet. It will never cease to call forth the higher glory.
Rabbi, I found this, like, in the translation it says, they, for some reason they translated covered as soul.
As what?
As soul, like neshama. In the translation.
In translation over there, yeah. Well, they translate it in concept. Okay, the neshama means the neshama of a Yidden recognizes the glory of the Meibashter, and that's why it's constantly calling forth from bottom upwards. The koved is the koved of the, what is the koved of person? The neshama that he has.
What do we say this pasuk means?
Huh?
What does this pasuk mean?
It simply means that the neshama here, the neshama that is here lemata, is constantly drawn to the higher source where it comes from.
What about like the literal translation?
L'man is a mechel koved, that the koved, that of the person. What is the koved of the person? What makes a human being a human being? His neshama. That's how you translate directly the neshama. Ura kvedi, right? Ura kvedi, ura haneva v'china, ura kvedi. Kvedi means my glory, which is my neshama. V'lo yidoim, and it will not, and it does not cease. It does not go quiet.
So it sings? Is
Does not stop. Huh?
Is Amarcha means it sings?
Right.
So it's saying that the covet of a person sings?
Right.
Oh, okay. I finally understand the connection.
Huh?
I finally understand the connection.
Covered and neshama.
Like, I was always like, I don't know.
Okay, so like I said, let's get the points and then we'll time together. Shehu mipnei, and this inyan and it's constantly calling forth the upper light. It is because heyois ho'ayin meruchok mibchinas ho'ani, because that the ayin is distant from the ani, from the bechina of ani. And why is it distant? B'kedei, in order sheyiyeh mitzius his havos hanivroim, in order that they should make it possible that there should be a mitzius of the creation of the nivroim. Okay, this is why the ayin is distant from the ani. V'lochein, and for this reason, because it is distant, for this reason, kori todil in heira ilah, it is arousing constantly the heira ilah, the upper light. V'lo shachich klal. Oh, you don't need any more? We don't have any more pages?
Yeah.
Okay, so take this book and make a few copies. Make pay base and pay gimel, okay, whatever. However it comes out over there, I don't know exactly.
I'll make for guys here.
Maybe we should stop recording while we are quiet. This whole Indian, eventually, like I said, we'll tie things together and we'll get to understand what ayin and ani is, and why this is called ayin. Why is the creation called yesh me'ayin? Yesh me'ayin. So it's from ayin. If it's a force that creates it, how is it called ayin?
It's a higher light.
Hmm?
It's a higher light. It's coming from something that's unknown.
It's called ayin for two reasons. It's higher than the yesh, but it's lower than its source. So it's called ayin from both sides. Ayin, then relative to the yesh, it's ayin. Because the yesh is dependent on being a mitzias, and this is not dependent on being a mitzias. Then from the other perspective, that relative to its source, it's ayin, it's insignificant. There it's really called ayin, because it's a non-entity.
It's like not related to the yesh. It's not related to the yesh. It's like
Coming from its source, like the sunlight, coming from the sun. Compare the sunlight to the sun, it's nothing. It's ayin. So therefore this ayin, if there it's called ayin for a different reason, because it's insignificant. It doesn't have the real presence like the sun itself.
it's about after or before, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
After it's like it's a yesh. Before it's ayin. Those are the two relative correlations.
I don't want him to miss out. I think
I can hear you, no?
Yeah, you hear me?
In the office.
Oh, they can hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear me. To get a perspective, get a handle on this ayin and yesh and all that, I want to use an analogy of a completely different setup. Let's say we created cars, and a car consists of many different parts, and the whole design and all that, all kinds of different elements are going to creating a car to make the car be able to move. So now it's a real presence. There's a mitzias there, a car. Let's go through the steps that brought the car into existence. The immediate step before that, before the car came into full focus, is that there were parts, and then a mechanic put the parts together. Okay, I got pay basic. Okay. So there were parts, and the mechanic put the parts together. On what basis did he put the parts together? Because he had a schematic, a plan. How this is supposed to be put together. Now, this schematic is just the design of the car on a piece of paper. The real entity, the real mitzias of the car, is when it comes together and physically. Okay? I'd like you to consider, where is there more wisdom in putting the car together, putting the parts together from the schematic, or drawing up the schematic? To draw up the schematic. Right?
What is the schematic here?
A full plan. To design this whole thing is much more wisdom. Right? So by the time that from this comes the actual putting together, this is like like the source and the essence of this car. But this essence is on a spiritual level, is on an intellectual level. You know, it's the, or whatever, it's the plan, which is spiritual relative to the car. It's like ayin in comparison to the car. But this ayin, even though this is ayin and this is yesh, and yet this ayin creates this yesh. And there's much more oil, much more significance in the ayin than in the yesh. Even though as far as usability is concerned, you can't sit down on a piece of paper and take a ride, but you can ride in the car. Okay? Now let's take it a step up. Let's take the schematic up, a step up. What's the matter? You okay? Making a bracha? By the time that this came up, that this schematic was drawn up, by that time, all the various systems that go into making a car have been designed. We know that we can have a motor that makes things move. We can make a motor move, and we can put wheels together that they should move and so forth. We knew all of the various capabilities that we can do. And then, taking from that, we created a schematic. So therefore, this schematic actually is the result of understanding a higher concept that the whole thing, that it's possible to transfer one moving element to another. The motor is turning, and this turn can be transferred, the power of this turn can be transferred to turn the wheels, which is a whole concept in itself. Above that is the concept that you can make something turn. Energy can be used to something turn. Okay? So all of these things have been designed before that. Ultimately, all that originates with the human being. What made the human being think about making a motor turn? That's what I mean? Okay, I'd like you to understand this. Sitting down in the car and moving is after the fact that the car is there, it can then drive. But what is the concept behind it? What initiated this whole process? What initiated the whole process is that a human being recognizes the unity in the whole world. That even though I'm here, but actually there's nothing restricting me from being here. If I'm here, I need to be here, I should be able to transport myself there. The whole Indian, the whole concept that there is unity in the world, that even though I was born here, doesn't mean that I have to stay here for the rest of my life. But I can go and visit other places. Not I can go visit, but it's beneficial. I have to go and conquer the whole world, like it says in the Torah. This is a depth in human sense, in human neshama. If this concept didn't exist, cars would never be created. A tree does not really need a car. A tree can live 1,000 years. It doesn't need a car to fulfill its mission in life. A human being does need a car, or a horse and buggy, whatever, He doesn't need. Why? Because he has a much broader perspective. This perspective is the initial creator source of the car. Can you compare the power and the wisdom and the intensity, the reality in this concept of total unity in the world, in what goes into putting a car together? You understand what I'm saying? They're totally incomparable. This is truly representative of a human soul. And this is just a mechanical element that translates itself, through some seichel process. So this original element that initiated this whole thought process is really part and parcel of the human soul. It's not part of the transportation department. This is really part of, this is the ani, this is the human being himself. This concept that ultimately translates itself, on the different levels, becomes less and less significant, all the way to the point where when you actually build a car, you don't even know what it's for. It could be just to have car races. You don't realize that what human element it represents. It becomes a toy. But it loses completely its significance, almost completely. And it originates from a soul element in the human being.
How is it a soul element? The idea?
It's a soul element because this whole inyan of uniting the whole world is exclusively in the human soul. No other creature in the world has that perception.
Can you explain a little more? Connect?
But
Connect?
no, not connect. The human being has as his godly task to conquer and transform the world. Transform the world.
Mm-hmm.
When the human being was created, God said, "Pru urvu," should be fruitful and multiply. Milos haaretz will fill the earth. V'chivshuha, it should conquer it. The entire world was created for the human being. Do you understand that? We understand that, right? This is, I think, an obvious principle. Like I always ask, what would the world be like if there were no human beings in the world? What kind of world would it be? Would it have any significance? Huh?
It's so much fun.
Would it be a lot of fun?
Yeah. For who?
What kind of fun would it be?
That's sarcastic.
Would it have any significance at all? It would be nothing. A human being, this is what the world is about. And every part of the world is enhanced by the fact that there is a human being in the world. And that's what human being has to be able to get around and declare the world his property.
So how does that relate to the car?
How do you get around?
My car.
You answered your question. What made people design a car? Because people had this impulse, this necessity to get around. Why do they have to get around? Because they cannot be limited to be in one place or another. Because he has this intensive responsibility and need as part of the human soul to conquer the whole world.
I'm not sure I want to conquer the whole world.
What?
I don't feel I want to conquer the whole world.
Yet.
You don't feel you want to conquer the whole world, but you want to conquer a little part of the world. Eventually.
Before.
Okay. You know, when you get married, and what's marriage about?
Having kids.
To have your own branch, your own part of the world, to own a piece of the world.
Right.
Okay, that's conquering.
So you say by having a car gets you on faster, so you can conquer faster.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are many aspects. I'm saying a car is not a necessity for every human being. I'm saying what brought it about, this whole development. Because the human being, because of the human quality. So looking at it from that inception point, you could see how this ani, or the essential element in the human being, how that translates in over various gyrations, various levels, until it becomes a physical car, where it loses almost completely the human touch, the human element. To the point where you can say, a car is made for car racing. It's a human toy. It lost completely its sense, of purpose and meaning. A necessity of life. Whereas where it started was something extremely significant. So this is kind of a brief analogy of the whole Inyan. There is the Oyer Laki, that is the source of a locus that where the whole Inyan of creation was conceptualized. Conceptualized with the purpose of revealing godliness in the world. And then it came through various levels until it became the ayin that creates the yesh. And when it created the yesh, you look at the yesh and say, what is this all about? Is this made for just for competition, to prove that I'm better than you? I mean, what is this about? Like the car is for the purposes of car racing. First now, you have to start, so to speak, revealing and understanding what is this yesh about? Where do you find value and significance in this yesh? Just like you're looking for the human element in the car. Where is the godly element in the world? Follow this? Understand? If you're going on your iron, yes, and all that, just to give us a little handle of what this is about. Because ultimately the world is a godly creation. And it starts all the way from Ani. And it's representative of that. By the time it goes through and becomes a world, you don't see that Ani at all. And if you saw it, then it wouldn't be a world. But this gives us a handle to understand what it means, a higher level and a lower level. Okay, gentlemen, to be continued in Mitzvah Shem? Huh? No? Now?